Welcome to the Two Docs Talk podcast. This is a podcast about lifestyle medicine, disease prevention, and longevity. We're so excited to bring you episode 25, where we summarize our first 24 episodes and talk about what's coming for the next year. Make 2024 your best year ever. Please remember this is provided for informational purposes only. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 25 of the podcast. We're so excited to have you here. This is an important milestone for us. We've done 24 episodes thus far about lifestyle medicine. This is number 25. And Abbas and I thought that it would be really great to do a summary episode. So this is going to encompass all 24 of those episodes. We're going to go through hit lots of the main topics. And of course, you can feel free to find the episodes that you're interested in and listen. We'll talk about all the pillars of lifestyle medicine today. And also, of course, always happy to answer your questions. If you like our videos, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps others find the videos and podcasts in the search algorithms. And at the end of this podcast, we're going to have some exciting announcements about the future of the podcast and new name. And we'll announce that here shortly. And some new media, so new website, social media, all sorts of new things. And we'll let you know about that. Let's go ahead and kick this off with a description about lifestyle medicine, and we can start with the pillars, and let Abbas take the first one, which will maybe start out with. We can start with exercise, which is one of our main, and that was our episode we did, episode 23, which was the episode all about exercise.
Well, before Rob, we started, I'm so excited. This is our 25th podcast. As one of the challenge in today's medicine, as you and I been involved for more than 20 years, is we see many diseases can easily be preventable. Majority of the GI problem, diabetes, fatty liver, cancer, obesity. So these are a huge problem amongst our patient population, not only in the United States, throughout the world. So we have covered many topics so far, and unfortunately, many physicians and many health providers, we get very minimal education in what's a diet and exercise, preventive medicine. As you have mentioned many times, we get trained on disease management, and that's where the bread and butter medicine it is. And unfortunately, we're fighting with the food industry and all this commercialization of the food, and patient very lack of knowledge and immediate gratification. So then this becomes a pandemic, that we see. So as what is the lifestyle medicine is, a person has a choice to choose the lifestyle. So for preventive disease and preventing many of diseases, is not one pillar will fix everything. Not one meal make you sick, and not one meal make you healthy. So as Rob mentioned, exercise is one of the crucial elements on many of the preventive medicine. And as we mentioned on the previous episode, we need at least 150 minutes per week, but easily can be done about 30 minutes per day, and not only for general exercise, we also have to do mental exercise as well, such as mental relaxation, yoga, Tai Chi, or just meditation. So exercise, it is one of the pillars of the preventive medicine and longevity, and that not have to be very sophisticated. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to go, climb a mountain, but can be done at your own, neighborhood, or if the weather is permitted, if not in your own bedroom, or just simply moving around the house or stationary back, and this can be all achieved.
One of the things that I learned about exercise was zone 2 training, and that was such a key thing, because it's zone 2. Oftentimes when at least I know when I was exercising, would often just blow right through, heart rate of, say, for me, it's about 115 to 125. That's a fairly low-ish heart rate, but zone 2 training is incredibly important. And it's one of those situations where the more you do, it's been shown to have improved not just endurance, but speed and all sorts of other metabolic parameters. So zone 2, literally, it's just an easy way to know that you're in zone 2 is just by when you're talking, you sound a little bit winded. You have to inhale, midway through sentence. That's when you know you're in zone 2. It's actually a fairly low level of exercise, but it's incredibly helpful. So I thought that was really interesting.
And that's a brief, you can do that, a brief walk with a friend, with your dog, and that's easy, achievable. You do not have to have any fancy shoes or just go to a gym. So this can be done even putting, up and down the stairs in your home. So that's really a good way easy way to start. And of course, conditioning is very, very important. When you're starting, you have to, do some warm up and stretching, and as well as to cool down. So that is very important. I think the next pillar is important that everybody wants to know is diet and the food intake. I think the food intake can be very confusing, and there's many markets for quick weight loss and many medicine today for losing weight. But unfortunately, many of those things has medicine some side effect, as well as many of those crash diet, the people regain their weight within 1 year. So, our body doesn't know whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, or 4th of July. So we need to take care of our body throughout the year with reasonable, enjoy the food, enjoy, but don't overindulge. And then the choice of what we we taking in the processed food, the sugary drinks, and the alcohol and toxics, all of those things that can jeopardize your health. So overall, if you start cooking at home, and in my opinion, if you keep it at least 80% plant-based, 10-15 chicken, fish, and red meat, that's at least a good starting point. Of course, the plant-based diet is excellent as long as you don't use too much processed food. So diet, we have spent I think a whole hour on the diet, and particularly in comparison with different diets, we concluded that the Mediterranean diet, the old Mediterranean diet, is probably one of the healthiest diet for cardiovascular, mental, total physical, and as well as inflammatory. So I think the dietary intake is a big part of this pillar of the lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, I agree. And the more I learn about lifestyle medicine, the more I'm convinced that it's not about a certain diet for all. It's everyone has to individualize this, and so it's really about finding that balance of what works for you. And what I found, and in working with patients as well, is that continuous glucose monitoring, or CGM, can be extremely helpful to find out what foods spike the blood sugar, what foods don't spike your blood sugar. If you don't sleep, what happens? If you drink a 8-ounce glass of orange juice, what happens? It's really quite striking, actually. And this is something that is it allows real-time monitoring, and so you can actually get down to the level of knowing what happens if you exercise after you eat, for example. And that's a great way to can actually blunt a glucose spike. So this is one area that I think the technology can really be helpful. Probably in 2024, where no one really knows what the Food and Drug Administration, or what's called the FDA, but we think the FDA may approve continuous glucose monitoring for over-the-counter use. And that's going to be revolutionary if that's available you can just go to your pharmacy or Amazon, buy a couple monitors and use it. So
and that's very important because, as many food that we eat, the glycemic load, as we discussed before, and glycemic index is very, very important. From a sort of, we talked about banana. If banana is a little bit not ripe, this has much lower glycemic index to when it's overripe. So it's completely changes there with the same thing with many starches, how you cook it and how much your sugar spikes. So there's a lot more to it, but I think every individual, as you mentioned, become very different background with different tastes and different ability. There's many area with food insecurity, but I think a little bit of personal investment in your health, I think, is worthwhile to pursue. And as I tell my patient, your health is the most important investment in your life, better than your car, better than your house. So if many people, especially people that have trucks, that says, think of your truck. You're not treating your body as good as your truck. So they when they see that, they will becomes a sort of more that. And of course, the preventive, the toxins, whether there's excess of alcohol, tobacco, substance abuse, and as well as we see a lot of people, they on multiple medication, and medication by itself can be toxic to the liver as well as mind and other things. So I think diet is a key things, and to the exercise and diet that is very, very important.
And in terms of something that a metabolic marker, the use of the hemoglobin A1C, and we've got a whole episode on that, and it's also linked in with our continuous glucose monitoring episode. That is so key. Getting that A1C down to ideally lower than 5.5 or lower really is the goal. Metabolic health is so critical. Let's go into the next pillar, which is sleep. And we have that's our previous episode 24. Dr. Rummel, we had a great conversation about sleep, and sleep also is not a one size fits all. However, there appear to be some common themes. At least really 7 hours is recommended, and you can show that, but less than that, folks have impaired response times, periods of inattention, micro sleeps, increase, car accidents, whatnot. And so I thought that was a great conversation with
Exactly,
Dr.
yes.
Rummel, and really, really incredibly important. Also for metabolic health, sleep is super important.
Also, just for cardiovascular, mental, and I think a good night's sleep, which initially a long time ago sleep was, I don't think so, was sort of measured up to people that take many stimulants, and the harder the work. But the more we study, the sleep really heals the body, mind, as well as help with longevity. As you mentioned, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And at the same time, people that oversleep, they can have decreased longevity, as well as napping for more than 90 minutes. So, but overall, I think sleep is one of the key pillars of well-being and for longevity. If you go to the blue zones or go to the more of ancient cultures, their sleep hygiene is very, very important. That you get it is important that you get a good night's sleeps and get up early in the morning. And with the next thing is, we discuss a lot about fasting, which is intermittent fasting is a big thing these days. Again, in my opinion, if you get up early in the morning and eat for 8 hours and then let your body rest at night, you sleep better, and you'll be more comfortable. And also that's we have a huge episode, so I think 1 or 2 episodes on that. What's that? Intermittent fasting, as well as many other things that you guys can listen to it more. But I think these are all sort of comes together for longevity and good life.
Okay, so the next one, stress management. This is something that we've we've talked about a little bit. We haven't had episodes devoted exclusively yet, but this is something we're going to be focusing on in
Near future.
2024. Yeah, it's stress management, and also looking at meditation, and we're going to have some. We'll talk a little bit about the Eastern traditions and how they approach this topic. I think that's the whole concept of meditation is very interesting and can be a useful tool. The different ways to look at this. Mindfulness is oftentimes one of the common themes. There's different approaches. So we'll have some podcasts about meditation and mindfulness, and also relationships. So important, being engaged, having that. We know we're really pack animals, and so having that interaction, whether it be friends or family or coworkers, having that engagement is so important, especially as we get older. And having those relationships is so key. Having that, whether it's whether you're in a village or a city or online, there's a lot of ways to get interaction. And it's, I think, one of the big paradoxes of modern society. We're more connected but more isolated than ever, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Exactly. I think with so much being on the media, as well as whether on TV or computer or this digitalization, many people they do have many, sometimes more friends, but they feel very lonely. I think, as you mentioned, we live in a very stimulus life, whether as as a physician, or you go to the hospital, or even daily things, or watching the TV. It is very important to be able to manage the stress and not create more. As I tell my patients, sometimes you can be in the middle of a beautiful rose garden and you be so stressed, but it could be the same times in the middle of a tornado and keep calm. And so those practice of meditation and cognitive control and relaxation, I think, is very, very important for our daily life as well as for our longevity. And so as Rob mentioned, many of the ancient tradition and blue zones, the gathering, the festivals, or some family gathering, or doing exercises together, whether when you go to China, or someone who you see at 5 o'clock, many elderly people come, they do Tai Chi. It's an incredible scene to see. So it's just a positive energy that you get from others. And sometimes you just talk about your problem, you solve it. So the loneliness can really cause you more distress and make you more, it just piles up. So these are very, very important, again, pillars of our longevity. So the next one, I think, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was just going to mention substances, and we'd be remiss not to mention, a huge part of lifestyle is, and our society, just there's a lot of substances out there that can really cause havoc, and so avoidance of tobacco is probably the biggest one that's going to impact longevity and quality of life the most. Alcohol in limited amounts. It's said that there's no quote safe dose of alcohol, but probably in small amounts it's probably fairly safe. But in any of these substances in excess are problematic and can really also damage not just one's health, but one's physical health, but mental health, and also those relationships that are so important.
Yeah, as you see in Colorado, since cannabis has been legalized, I see so many of my patients, even elderly patients, they have become the thing, because it's legal, it's good for them, and they use it daily and sometimes to excess. And then we see many cannabis nausea, vomiting, many they have chronic bloatiness and abdominal pain, as well as will interfere. Initially, they think they can sleep well, but then at the same time, they becomes more dependent. So even that, like alcohol, small amount, maybe okay, but when you excess to that, and there's many other substance abuse, but something that is really overlooked, as I mentioned before, is polypharmacy, or taking too many medication. Some people, they need coffee to wake up, and take an Ambien to sleep, and then maybe an Adderall to focus. So these are, for short time, maybe beneficial, but for longevity, I think they're harmful to the body.
Okay. We can. Do you have any others, Abbas, or we'll move on to the next
I think
topic?
hydration. Of course, we live in Colorado. I think hydration is very, very important. So we live in a very dry mountain desert climate, and drinking water to adequately that you're well hydrated. And I tell my patients it's easy to do 2 glasses of room temperature water before each meal, and the rest is based on your activity. Enough drinking that make your urination clear, and by the same token, avoiding this. There's sugar drinks everywhere, whether from sodas, and the substitute sugar is worse, and energy drinks even worse. And I see many of my co-workers and many employees, they start in the morning with an energy drinks, or a double dose of coffee with many other additives into it. So I think hydration state is very, very important for longevity, prevent from nausea, prevent from headaches, kidney stones, constipation, and also energy, as well as be able to focus. So I think water is another important element for longevity.
And that's a great point. Yeah, I never knew I needed to drink so much water. I could drink so much water until I moved to Colorado, and I'm like, oh my goodness, why is my mouth dry every 5 minutes? I just wanted to add one little tag we had way early on in the podcast, we had some talk about new technology, and if you've been a listener, you know that I'm always interested in looking at new things, and I'm always fascinated by how these new technologies can be used to improve or health, or measure something that we couldn't measure before. And I reference everyone to the podcast about epigenetic clocks. I just think that's such a hugely important area. So we can actually now quite literally measure biological age, and hear that term thrown around a lot, biological age and chronological age. But basically the idea is that for every year of your age, your chronological age, your 365 days, you can actually age less than 1 year biologically. And these tests are highly accurate. They're highly predictive of overall survival. And so, it is actually doing all these things. And really what the approach that we've, I think that we're really, really putting forth here and talking about, and kind of our trademark is, doing things we just mentioned, but you don't have to do anything in extreme amounts. For example, we're not saying, eat, 5 pounds of potatoes a day, or eat some, or go on some, some carnivore diet or something like that. It's about doing each of these things in a fairly small amount, but consistently. And that's the key. A few weeks is not going to really make a big difference in your life, but whether it's, really looking at, okay, how can I improve my sleep? How can I improve the diet, exercise, and just go down the line. And that's really where the big benefits add up. And you can actually see, on an epigenetic clock, you can get your biological age 10 or even maybe even 20 years less than your chronological age. So I think that's a really neat part of that. This is actually something we can measure now. And this is, a few $100s. It's not $50,000 or $100,000 like it was 10 years ago.
Yes, I think, sometimes, especially this time of year, I see many of my patients that they have more acid reflux and belly pain. somehow between Thanksgiving and seem like New Year's is like a green lights, excess of drinking, food, cookies, and this is all they go to dry January, and then February they want to do exercise. I tell them this is a long life. You cannot just pile up and then go for a month. And so this is a long plan. Enjoy yourself, but in moderation. So I think we touch a lot of this preventive medicine. I think as we get older, we need to do our screening too, as well as you mentioned, hemoglobin A1C, and do other tests and do the basic chemistry, the thyroid function, hemoglobin A1C, as well as screening for female, for example, for appropriate age for breast cancer, cervical cancer, as well as colonoscopy. There's a few cancers that we can really prevent, and these are in female, breast, colon, and cervical; in male, prostate and colon. So the rest, we try to prevent the toxic from smoking, other things. So these are some basic stuff we can do and for longevity. And I think this also goes hand to hand. So you can do yourself, but also do your markers for longevity and all of that. And so you can have at least a roadmap that where you're going and what you can prevent.
Okay, so we've come to our announcement part of the podcast, and so we're very happy and to let everyone know that we've been working with a group of students from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and it's the Bachelor of Innovation program. And I've just been so impressed by the students, and they've been helping us to redesign our website, our logo, and a name. And we're going to announce that right here. So let's let me get my screen up here. We can share the website. Okay, so I'm very happy to announce that this is our new website. So it's and you can we'll have all the info for links in the show notes. So the new name is Two Docs Talk, and the idea is it's two docs talking, and that was the name that the students came up with. I thought that was a great name, very unique. And this is the new website, which is now active, and it'll be growing here in the next few weeks. We'll have some photos of both of us and some more content on this page. There's links to YouTube, and you can click on the podcast link, and you see the new logo there, and all the podcasts are there. So right now, everything is in the same place as the Doc to Doc website. That's all in place still. But over the next few months, we'll be migrating to this new platform. And we're just so excited. We'll have social media, we'll have a Facebook page and some other social media pages as well. And really want to continue that discussion with everyone. And, just if there's topics that you want us to cover or questions, please reach out to us.
Or also, if anybody they interested to be interviewed for their point of view, we like to have interview different people from their perspective, and I think that'd be another area to focus on. So now the student, they did a great job. I'm so happy with their choices and their hard work. So I think with the next month or so, this is going to come to a very nice, happy product. So thanks to them, and we're looking forward to having further podcasts, especially about stress management, as well as other interviews about meditation, and as well as longevity. So thank you for listening to us, and we're looking forward to the new episodes.
And we'll see you in 2024. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.